G'day guys. As you probably heard, Westpac were recently the victim of a large corporate fraud in the order of $285 million. This surprised nobody and annoyed me so much that I started recording this video without even wearing a cat-themed t-shirt. Be right back. I'm an ex-Westpac business banking employee. I had a great time there. All the staff there are awesome, except for this one guy who said I was a bully because I called him a homie. Anyway, I'll tell that story later in the piece. So, I get to tell you the story about the all-G homie incident. Speaking of backwards cultures within organizations. I'm gonna anonymize the email, but post it up next to me so you can read through this at your own leisure. But I will also narrate it for entertainment purposes. So a bit of background. I had a brief foray back into banking after self-employment because I thought it would be sick and they would have actually spent some money on technology in the last 8 years. But it turns out they hadn't, it was terrible, and banks are gonna slowly fade into obscurity unless they fix things. So I'm in the bank, haven't been in corporate for years. So I don't really remember how it works. I'm trying to behave myself. I don't want to do anything too provocative. I don't get fired one weekend. So I'm down at the branch, talking to this other staff member. He's like my age, seemed like a pretty cool guy. And he asked me to fix just a minor problem, so I fixed it. And then he said, "Thanks for fixing it." And I replied, "Oh gee, homie." He seemed like a bit of a G, he was my age, relaxed guy. Gave me a high five. And then I received the following reply to my email. "Hi Nicholas." It's never a good sign, no one calls me that. "I just wanted to let you know that I don't appreciate being called a homie. I'm not sure, but you may not be aware of some of the connotations that term brings in relation to gang membership. You may mean to use it in a friendly way to build rapport, but I'm sorry to say that word doesn't resonate positively for me. I would like to build a good relationship with you, so I'd rather bring it up with you now rather than just let it slide by. And yes, I hope it all can still be good." I'm not in a gang. No one's in a gang. No one in gangs uses the word homie. That's not a thing. That's from TV. Anyway, I digress just because that was a really funny story and that dude's an idiot. So, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, cultural problems and innovation within large organizations. Right, gotcha. So, one of the key problems is that a large hierarchical organization cannot innovate because it crystallizes once it reaches a certain size. So there's this really good book by Niall Ferguson called The Square and the Tower about the difference between networks and hierarchies. And essentially, innovation takes place in a chaotic environment where there's lots of debate, argument, and mixed ideas, diversity of thought. This cannot take place in a hierarchical organization by nature of its structure. One of the other problems you find, especially in large organizations with a large compliance focus, like finance, is that there's a culture of accountability. What this means, though, isn't accountability in the sense of you or me, we find a problem and I fix it. Accountability in the sense of who can I blame for this fuck up? So every time there's a fuck up, which is often, someone will put a new spreadsheet in place so that if they get blamed, they can go, "Not my spread, not me, spreadsheet, that guy." Then what you have is this increased bureaucratic load, as every time there's been a mistake or an issue, people don't try to intelligently redesign a process so the mistake can't happen. They just put a thing on top to make sure it's not their fault. What this means is that the bureaucratic weight of an organization eventually gets so heavy with this that it gums it up and makes it unable to make fast decisions. Another problem with essentially a hierarchical organization is a narrow focus and lack of diversity of ideas. So large organizations are big into diversity hiring because you have to these days, and if you say you're not, you get crucified. But they're not into hiring diversity of thought. So a really good example of that is there's this program within Westpac they were doing to innovate, change their processes, mix it up, get with the future. The guy who they had running the project has only ever worked at Westpac his whole career. How can he create innovative new ideas if he's never experienced other organizations or cultures? That's literally like why food was so bad in Europe in the Middle Ages, because no one ever went anywhere. And then Marco Polo came back and he's like, "Boys, wait till you hear about curry." So when you have a large hierarchical organization with large hierarchical project structures, you can't have innovative thinking because there isn't the inherent networked effects of chaotic ideas and debate. It just can't work. It won't work. And lo and behold, the programs were lame, didn't fundamentally address problems, were just window dressing. The other thing is that The process of innovation requires a high degree of risk and failure by nature of what it is. It's basically like you have a hunch, you have a go, you see if it works. If it doesn't work, whatever, you try something else. A large hierarchical structure can't really do this very well. You can't go to like someone in, I'll say ANZ this time just to give Westpac a rest, and be like, hey, I think this process will work. It's going to cost me 30 grand, but it also might not. It can't work that way. People don't want to sign off on things that don't have a tangible ROI. But the problem is the process of creation is chaotic and destructive. That's why when you look at the most innovative and disruptive startup ideas, they always come from some weird external source somewhere or some random crazy guy. They never come from an internal structured environment. What's even more frustrating about these compliance, risk, and process issues within these organizations is that they have a functionally limitless budget to develop this with. Like, if Westpac got $1 billion fine about this AusTrack thing and they just paid it and that's that and we're done now. $1 billion. So next time someone says there's not a budget for a project, there is. There's just not the political will. There's issues within large corporate organizations that I solved in my last business with my mate and $500. And people will say, yeah, it's complicated, it's not that easy, blah, blah, process. Are you telling me with $500 million we couldn't solve that problem? Because I think we could. We can solve a lot of things. It's just a lack of cultural will, a lack of risk tolerance internally, and a lack of a culture of innovation. And those things cannot be fixed easily without some sort of internal destructive event, which is why I believe that large orgs, especially banks, will kind of do a blockbuster and just sort of start sliding off into oblivion over the next few years while other players come through. If you look at product offerings from people like Square, PayPal, Shopify, they're now doing finance for small, medium businesses based on the turnover data they have themselves. And why not? PayPal has all of your turnover data. Shopify has all of your turnover data. They know about the turnover of your business before you do. They can predict trends and problems from the aggregated data they have of all their shops prior to anyone else. Traditionally in small business, when you assess, you're looking at financial data from 12, 18 months ago. How are you supposed to make a decision on lending in the future, especially in the situation with a rapidly growing business, when you're looking at data that's 18 months old? Businesses will triple turnover in that time. It just doesn't make any sense. On top of this, banks are currently struggling, and most organizations are struggling to retain younger customers. When I say younger, I mean like, let's say 40 and younger. Do you know why? Because every other aspect of our lives is easy except dealing with banks and large organizations and utilities. I set up a company in Singapore in 20 minutes, but it's crazy how hard stuff is here. Then you've got people with no native understanding of what younger consumers want, just producing these shit products and then being like, hey guys, listen up. We've updated the banking app. You can now look at your balances from the notifications without opening the app. And you're like, oh, well, can you guys like automatically round up savings or anything? And they're like, no, you don't want that. You don't want that, shut up. Again, this all comes back to a fundamental lack of focus on tech over the last 15 years, which is now catching up with them because the horse is bolted. Sorry, just got an order on my online store. When I look at this overall, what's happening with banking, what's happening with this fraud, what are the trends in the future? Here are my picks. 1, this isn't going to be the last we hear about this style of invoice fraud. I think there's a heap more going on at the institutional level across all banks. 2, I think that banks will not be able to innovate their way out of this because they don't have the political will to make the hard decisions to create new processes, new structures, and new innovative products that are actually innovative and aren't just some bullshit where they've put a new skin on top. 3, I think that millennial and Gen Y customers will continue leaving large orgs and going to competitor businesses because their products are better, they're easier to deal with, and their structure is more reflective of the values and how younger people like to operate. What should Westpac do? Should they give up on banking? Should they sell bananas? No, but they should put some money into some decent tech because now they've lost $1 billion AusTrack fine and $285 million worth of fraud, and they still got shit products they're not doing anything with. What could be worse than losing $1.2 billion? You've already had the worst thing happen. Take some interesting risks with creative stuff. Maybe you'll revamp. Spin off a bank. God, just do something, anything. Their model's dying. They won't realize their model's dying until it's too late. This is literally just like Blockbuster or Kodak. It's a dying product offering. You can see it's dying. No one's doing anything. And yeah, no one wants to sign $1 billion tech build. Yep. Yes, that is true. But it's either that or your share value is just going to slide into obscurity as people go literally anywhere else. Anyway, if you're from Westpac, sorry I dunked on you. Also not sorry, these are avoidable problems that you decided not to solve. Don't sue me. Didn't say anything confidential. If you'd like to ring me up and ask my opinion on what you could actually do to make things better, I'm around. Otherwise, I'm going to go have a sleep.